I was let go on a Thursday morning in a beige conference room with no windows. My name is Daniel Rourke, 54 years old, and for nearly 2 decades I was the lead systems engineer at Ironvale Industries. I built their backbone, code infrastructure, fail-safes, everything. And yet after 18 years of loyal service I was told I was a legacy cost. Those were the exact words used by our new CTO, Mason Trent. Nothing personal, he said, with that robotic MBA smile. We just have to optimize our burn rate. 3 juniors can replace your line item. I nodded once, reached for the manila envelope on the table and said, then make sure they don't trip over the wires I built. If you believe karma always comes for those who betray trust, type justice always wins in the comments. Mason didn't flinch. Maybe he thought he'd won. Diane from HR tried to soften the blow with small talk about transition packages and exit counseling. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. They thought they were cutting costs, but what they actually cut was the one person holding the system together. I stood up, shook their hands like a gentleman and walked out with a single cardboard box. 19 years of innovation and sweat, reduced to 6 pounds plastic and paper. The rest, my knowledge, my foresight, wasn't something they could pack or replace. My wife Jenna was waiting for me at home. So it finally happened, she said. I nodded. She didn't cry or ask what I'd do next. She'd seen it coming even before I did. For the last year, ever since Ironvale was acquired by a private investment group, she kept warning me. New management always means cleaning house, she said. And the more irreplaceable you make yourself, the more threatening you are to people like Mason. She wasn't wrong. Mason had arrived 6 months ago with buzzwords and whiteboards talking about cloud-first transformations and modular velocity pipelines. He wanted to migrate everything to generic platforms because that's what the consultant slides told him. Never mind that our custom systems had kept us running lean and agile for years. I tried to explain the intricacies, the interdependencies, the careful redundancies I'd designed after a decade of trial and error. He didn't want to hear it. Too niche, he said, too dependent on one person. Funny thing was, I agreed with him on that part. It was too dependent on one person. Me. Because Ironvale never funded documentation teams, never approved internal training, never allowed me to take on apprentices. You're too fast, they said. Just get it done. So I did. Quietly, thoroughly, but always alone. I had asked for backup. I had warned them, but they wanted speed over structure, and now they were going to find out what it cost to fly blind. That night after dinner I sat by the fire pit in the backyard, watching embers drift into the night. Jenna brought me a glass of scotch and sat down beside me. What's next? She asked. I sipped, stared into the dark, and said, now we wait. The first call came 3 days after I was fired. I was in my garage tuning the old motorcycle I'd been meaning to fix for years. My phone buzzed. Ironvale's number. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, another buzz. Then another. Finally, a text from Claire, one of the junior engineers Mason had hired. Daniel, we can't access the network backup scheduler. It keeps failing. You remember how the fail-safe triggers were set up? I stared at the message, shook my head and went back to tightening bolts on the engine. This wasn't the time for answers. This was the time for silence. By the end of that week, Jenna told me I was smiling in my sleep. You've never slept this deeply, she said over breakfast. 18 years of pressure left with that cardboard box. I chuckled. But I was also watching. Ironvale's online tenant system was showing latency issues. A few client-facing tools went down intermittently. Nothing catastrophic yet. But the cracks were forming. I had built that system to be airtight if handled properly. The wrong update at the wrong time, though. The whole thing could seize up like an engine missing oil. By Monday, the cracks had become fractures. The database that stored lease agreements had reverted to an outdated schema, and the integration layer connecting billing to maintenance started throwing validation errors. Mason called. Again, this time he left a voicemail laced with panic. Daniel, we could use a quick consult. Paid, of course. Just need a few hours of your time to stabilize a few things. His voice was strained, thinner than usual. Like someone discovering that 3 junior engineers with certifications didn't quite measure up to nearly 2 decades of hands-on architecture. I didn't respond. Not because I was bitter, but because I'd already warned them. I had sent 4 separate memos over the past 2 years requesting a proper documentation process. Each one denied, too expensive, too time-consuming. They thought I was exaggerating, trying to protect my turf. They didn't realize I was protecting them. Now, without me, They were left with a system more complex than they could decipher, and no roadmap to follow. Jenna said, "It's not revenge if they did it to themselves." On Wednesday, a former colleague named Priya called. She used to run internal QA testing before the restructuring downsized her department. "They pulled me back as a contractor," she said, laughing without humor. "The whole system is on life support." Graham. You remember Graham from accounting. He accidentally triggered a data wipe in the staging environment. Mason is walking around like he's aged 10 years in a week. I asked if she needed help. "No," she said. "I just wanted you to know they're realizing what they lost." That night, Jenna and I opened a bottle of wine and watched the lake shimmer under the moonlight. "You planning to go back if they up the offer?" she asked. I shook my head. They never saw the value. I'm not giving them a second chance to disrespect it. She smiled. "Good, because I think something better is coming." 10 days after my dismissal, the story began to spill beyond Iron Vale's walls. A few clients reached out to me directly, ones I'd worked with personally over the years. One of them was Mark Emerson, CEO of a property group that used our systems for tenant onboarding and financial reporting. "Daniel, we've been trying to submit maintenance records for over a week," he said. "Support keeps saying it's under review. Is this related to you leaving?" I paused, then answered plainly, "You could say that." He sighed. "Let me know where you land next. We'll follow." That message stuck with me. Not because it flattered my ego, but because it confirmed something deeper. Trust wasn't just about code. It was about consistency, relationships, and execution over time. I hadn't just built systems at Iron Vale, I'd built confidence, and now that confidence was bleeding out, drop by drop. Jenna read the text and said, "That's your leverage, not code. Reputation." The real shift came 2 weeks later, when a recruiter from a regional competitor called. Riverstone Holdings had been scaling fast, and they'd apparently heard through the industry grapevine about Iron Vale's collapse. "We don't want the drama," the recruiter said, "but we do want your brain." I agreed to a casual conversation. That turned into an in-person meeting. That turned into a job offer. The role? Senior Vice President of Engineering Strategy with a signing bonus, relocation package, and full autonomy over system architecture. I didn't say yes right away, not because I wasn't interested, but because something inside me needed to finish unfolding. I still felt like I had one last thing to prove. Not to Mason, not even to Iron Vale, but to myself. Proof that walking away doesn't mean losing. That quiet integrity, when backed by action, speaks louder than any retaliation. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Claire, the junior engineer who'd first texted me. "Mason is losing it. Diane from HR left last week. The consultants they brought in can't make sense of your framework. He keeps blaming everyone but himself. Today," he said, "we're hemorrhaging credibility." I read the message twice, then put the phone down. Let them feel it. Let the truth do what it always does, surface. That afternoon, I emailed Riverstone. "Let's talk again. I have ideas." The recruiter replied within 5 minutes. "We've cleared Friday for you. Bring everything you've got." And I would. But this time, I wasn't bringing just skill. I was bringing experience forged in fire. One betrayal at a time. The meeting at Riverstone wasn't like any corporate pitch I'd given before. It wasn't about charts or buzzwords. It was about grit, scars, and foresight. The kind of clarity that only comes after losing something you built with your own 2 hands. Their executive team gathered in a quiet boardroom with a view of the river, and I told them the full truth. How a system becomes fragile when you chase short-term profit over long-term reliability. How documentation is never a luxury, it's a shield. And how engineering isn't just code, it's continuity, legacy, trust. By the end of the hour, the room was silent. Then the CTO leaned forward and said, "How fast can you start?" I took a breath. 3 weeks. I want to bring my own team. He nodded. Approved. I already knew the first person I'd call: Alan, my former database engineer, the one who'd stood by me even as the foundation cracked. Jenna smiled when I told her. "Not revenge," she whispered. "Redirection." But as I was preparing for the new role, the past still tried to claw back. A certified letter arrived from Iron Vale's legal department. They were accusing me of creating proprietary dependency and withholding operational knowledge. It was laughable, considering I'd requested training budgets for over a decade. Still, I passed the letter to a lawyer friend. He called me the next day and said they don't have a leg to stand on, but they're panicking. That's what this is. A few days later, Alan called me with a tip. Iron Veil systems have officially crashed. Billing cycles are weeks behind. Clients are leaving. Mason tried to reactivate one of your legacy modules and corrupted their analytics database. I shook my head. They thought cheaper meant smarter. They're learning now that knowledge costs more when you throw it away. The final nail came from Mark Emerson, the client who'd promised to follow. We've officially terminated our contract with Iron Veil, he said over the phone. Too many failures. Too many excuses. Let me know when your new system is ready. I want Riverstone to handle everything. I wrote down his number and circled it. That was the beginning of something real. At home that evening, I pulled the last of my Iron Veil files from the bookshelf. I thumbed through the hand-drawn system diagrams, the notes, the flowcharts I'd built on napkins and whiteboards. I placed them all in a single folder and labeled it, Lessons Paid For. I wasn't going back, but I wasn't leaving empty-handed either. The first day at Riverstone felt like stepping into sunlight after years underground. The walls weren't plastered with motivational posters or fake mission statements. They were lined with whiteboards, half-drawn ideas, active problems, team notes still in flux. It was a company in motion, not one obsessed with appearances. Lawrence, the CEO, walked me to my new office, which wasn't much larger than anyone else's. We believe in capability, not hierarchy, he said with a grin. I liked him already. My first decision was easy. Build a team that wouldn't just fix problems but prevent them. I brought on Alan as lead data systems architect. I called Priya to run QA. Claire even reached out, ready to leave Iron Veil for something better. I don't want to just code, she said. I want to learn how to build things right. I hired her. We weren't assembling engineers. We were assembling guardians of systems meant to endure. Meanwhile, Iron Veil continued to unravel. Jenna showed me an article one morning, buried on page 12 of a business weekly. Former real estate tech giant struggles amid system collapse. I recognized the quotes from Mason, dodging responsibility, blaming legacy systems, claiming they'd been miswilled by former staff. He never used my name. He didn't have to. Everyone in the industry knew who built those systems and who let them rot. 2 weeks in, Riverstone gave me a special project. We've acquired a distressed property group that used Iron Veil software. Lawrence explained. They're stuck. Think you can help them transition? I reviewed the database dump and nearly laughed, my own architecture staring back at me like an old friend. I can do more than help, I said. I can rebuild it better. Every night that week I stayed late, piecing together a migration blueprint. I designed with clarity in mind. Scalability, transparency, security, but above all, documentation. Every module annotated, every integration mapped. Claire stopped by my desk one evening, peering over my shoulder. So this is what right looks like, she said. I nodded, and this time we teach it to everyone. The transformation was swift. Clients who'd fled Iron Veil began inquiring about Riverstone. The name Daniel Keene started circulating, not as a ghost of a failed system, but as the architect of its rebirth. One email stood out, from a former Iron Veil executive. We didn't know what we had until we lost it, he wrote. I didn't reply. Some silence is a message in itself. It was late October when the call came that would close the loop. Jenna answered the home phone and handed it to me with a raised eyebrow. It's Mason, she mouthed. I took the receiver in silence. On the other end, his voice had lost all polish. Daniel, I know this is unexpected, but I wanted to ask if we could meet. Off the record. I think we need your help. I almost ended the call right there, but something in his tone wasn't just desperation, it was resignation. Meet me where? I asked. Your call, he said. Somewhere neutral. I gave him the address of a small diner on the edge of town, one I used to frequent during late-night system rollouts. If we were going to have this conversation, it would happen on my terms. When I walked in, Mason was already seated. No designer suit this time, just a wrinkled shirt, hollow eyes, and a folder clutched in his hands. Thank you for coming, he said. You didn't have to. I didn't respond. He slid the folder across the table. Internal reports, projections, legal notices. We're days away from losing our largest client. The board's furious. I've been removed from my position as of next week. I scanned the documents. Declining performance, client attrition, failed audits. The consequences of short-term thinking had landed hard. You knew this was coming, I said. Mason looked down. I thought we could replace systems, replace people, but I didn't understand how deeply woven you were into every part of this company. I closed the folder. That's what experience looks like, Mason. You don't hire it. You earn it. He nodded, eyes glassy. I don't expect forgiveness, but I had to say this face to face. We were wrong. And I was wrong. I stood slowly. I didn't need an apology, I said. But maybe you did. I left him there, amid the crumbs of what he'd broken. Back at Riverstone, things were moving faster than expected. Westland Realty, a multi-state property firm, had signed with us to build their entire tech stack. It was the biggest contract in our company's history. Lawrence called a company-wide meeting and announced a new initiative, the Keen Model, a full framework based on my architecture, processes, and engineering philosophy. Claire stood at the back of the room and smiled. That night, Jenna and I sat on the back porch watching the lake shimmer under a harvest moon. "You didn't burn the bridge," she said quietly. "You built something better beside it." I nodded, not in pride but in peace. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need them to fail. I just needed to prove to them and to myself that building things the right way still mattered in a world obsessed with shortcuts. And now, the weeks that followed were a blur of momentum. Riverstone's engineering division tripled in size, and I was given full autonomy to build out an internal education arm. Not just for onboarding but for legacy knowledge, something most tech companies ignore until it's too late. We called it Foundations, a program to teach not just how things work but why they were built that way. Claire took the lead on curriculum, and Alan hosted the first seminar, How to Think Like a Systems Architect. There wasn't an empty seat in the room. Westland Realty's migration completed ahead of schedule. No downtime, no lost data, no screaming clients, just a smooth transition into something resilient. One of their VPs sent a message. "This is the first time I've slept through a quarter end in 10 years. That meant more to me than a paycheck ever could." Meanwhile, the industry was watching. Articles began surfacing, not just about Riverstone's rise but Iron Vale's collapse. I didn't gloat. I didn't post. I didn't tweet. I just got back to work, because that's what real builders do. They don't shout, they create, quietly and consistently until their work speaks for itself. Then one afternoon, Lawrence walked into my office holding a sheet of paper. "I wanted you to see this," he said. It was a formal letter of acquisition intent. Riverstone was in talks to purchase Iron Vale's remaining assets for less than a third of what the company had once been worth. "They're finished," Lawrence said. "But their servers, their contracts, their remaining tech, some of it is still salvageable. If we move fast." I looked at the letter, then back at him. "If we do this, I want oversight of the integration. No games, no ego, just clean execution." He nodded. "That's exactly why I'm showing this to you first." We closed the deal quietly. No press, no fanfare. And on a rainy Monday morning, I walked through Iron Vale's old headquarters for the first time in over a year. The lights flickered. The desks were half empty. A few familiar faces looked up and quickly looked away. I wasn't there for revenge. I was there for the code I'd written, the systems that still had my fingerprints on them. They weren't monuments to the past. They were blueprints for the future. As we migrated what was salvageable into Riverstone's ecosystem, I insisted on one thing. Every engineer on the project had to document what they learned. Every line of recovered code had to be explained. If we were going to rebuild, we were going to do it right. And for the first time in decades, I felt like I was building something not just for clients but for the next generation of builders too. 1 year after the acquisition, the transformation was complete. Iron Vale no longer existed. Not in name, not in practice. The systems had been absorbed, rebuilt, and restructured under Riverstone's leadership. What remained was leaner, stronger, and more future-proof than anything I'd designed before. Not because it was newer, but because every line of code, every module, every process was forged from the lessons I had paid dearly to learn. On a crisp morning in late spring, we held a team summit. Our first with the fully integrated tech division. Lawrence opened the meeting, but when he handed the mic to me, the room grew silent. I looked around, dozens of engineers. Some I'd known for years, others just beginning their journey. "I want to tell you something," I said. "When I was let go from my last job, I wasn't angry. I was tired. Tired of explaining why quality mattered. Tired of fighting to do things the right way while everyone else chased shortcuts. But I wasn't done. Not even close." I paused, then continued. "What we've built here together, it's not just software. It's a philosophy. It's a statement that experience has value, that details matter, that the people behind the code, their care, their thinking, that's what keeps systems alive when pressure hits." Claire clapped first. Then the whole room followed. Later that evening, I received one last message from Mason. A short email. "We sold the last of the Iron Vale servers today. Thought you'd want to know. I heard about your promotion. You earned it. All of it. No hard feelings, just respect. Mason. I didn't reply. Not out of malice, but because there was nothing left to say. That summer I took a week off, my first real vacation in nearly a decade. Jen and I drove up to the Adirondacks. No phones, no laptops, just a cabin, a lake, and quiet. On the third day I sat on the porch with a mug of coffee watching the mist rise off the water. I thought about the people who tried to replace me. The system they thought was too complex. The lessons they had to learn the hard way. And I smiled, not out of revenge, but fulfillment. Because in the end, I hadn't just outlasted them. I'd outbuilt them.